There are people who seem to walk through the world as if they are listening to a melody that nobody else can hear. There are people who do not respond immediately, not because they hesitate, but because they are processing the entire universe behind a single question. People who see stories in silences, meaning in details, and depth in what seems insignificant. These mysterious, intense, quietly observant beings are called deep thinkers. But what almost nobody knows is that their mind does not work like everyone else's. They are internal architects, divers of the invisible, translators of what is never said out loud. And although the world sees them as reserved, distracted, or even complicated, their psychology reveals something completely different. A vast, sensitive, and fiercely alive inner world. Today we are going inside that world, and if you have ever felt like your brain simply refuses to operate on the surface, this video will finally explain why. For most people, thinking is an act. For the deep thinker, it is a vital function, as necessary as breathing. They do not simply look at a tree. They observe its history, the way it stretches toward the light, the silent narrative between its roots and the earth that holds it. The ordinary becomes metaphor, a gesture becomes hypothesis, a silence becomes a path to explore. Psychologically, these individuals possess a key trait called high introspection. They do not only analyze what happens outside, they explore with the same intensity everything that happens inside. While others react, they reflect. While others speak, they observe. While others pass through life, they decode it. This depth, however, comes at a cost. By the time they are finally ready to speak, the conversation has already changed direction, and so they remain silent. A silence that many interpret as coldness, shyness, or disinterest, but that in reality is processing, sensitivity, and precision. If that resonates with you, drop a comment right now telling me at what point you realized you think differently from most people. I read every single comment. Deep thinkers do not only think. They think about how they think. Psychology calls this metacognition, and for them, it is not a tool. It is their habitat. They analyze their logic, their intuition, their emotions, and even the shadows of their motivations. Everything is examined, reorganized, and questioned. This makes them incredibly self-aware, but also vulnerable to something devastating. Self-criticism in high definition. Because when you can see every internal nuance, you also see your cracks with merciless detail. While others ask, "What do I want?" they ask, "Why do I want it? What does that desire mean? What would happen if I get it? And what would happen if I do not?" Sometimes that depth turns into a labyrinth, and they forget that life does not always demand to be analyzed. Sometimes it just needs to be felt. A deep thinker can be surrounded by people and still find themselves standing at the edge of the world, looking inward. They do not seek solitude as an escape, but as a place to breathe. There, far from the noise, they can untangle thoughts that others do not even know exist. From the outside, they appear calm, but inside, their emotions move like deep tides, silent, invisible, and intense. In a cafe, staring at nothing, they seem absent. In reality, they are reconstructing a memory from 10 years ago, trying to understand what it revealed about who they were and who they are now. It is not obsession. It is internal cartography. They are trying to draw the map of their own mind. Here is where a capacity appears that separates the deep thinker from the simple overthinker. Existential thought. While an ordinary thinker worries about the future, the deep thinker questions reality itself. What is consciousness? What does it mean to exist? How do we know what we know? Why does what matters actually matter? Questions without answers, but questions that for them are fuel. This ability is wonderful, yes, but it can also become a trap. Because when your mind can connect anything to anything, you can invent patterns that do not exist. Over-interpret a gesture, a silence, an absence. It is like having a microscope so powerful that you start seeing fractures nobody should examine that closely. And yet it is that same intensity that has driven the deep thinkers who changed the world. Minds like Einstein, Da Vinci, or Jung, who did not merely see what was, but what could be. The problem is not the depth. The problem is that we live in a world that rewards speed. Reflection looks like indecision. Silence looks like disinterest. Complexity looks like confusion. And so many deep thinkers learn to hide their depth, to fit into a rhythm that is foreign to them, to smile while their mind is traveling galaxies away. Only when they are alone does their real dialogue begin. Deep thinkers are selective, not out of arrogance, but out of sensitivity. Empty conversations exhaust them. Superficial connections leave them cold. Relationships without truth feel impossible. They do not seek quantity, they seek resonance. They look for someone whose inner world vibrates at the same frequency as theirs. When they find that person, they open the door. And when they do, they give themselves completely. But that vulnerability is a double-edged sword. They expect the same depth in return. They expect coherence, sincerity, and intention. And when reality does not measure up, the pain is not small. It is cosmic, because for them, everything carries meaning. If you are watching this and nodding, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it tells me that this kind of content matters to you. That helps more than you know. There is a psychological phenomenon called deep processing, the tendency to store not just what happened, but the emotional meaning of what happened. Deep thinkers do not store memories. They store entire ecosystems. A song is not a melody. It is an entire room from their past. An object is not an object. It is a compressed story. That is why nostalgia hits them with particular intensity. And that is why losses, changes, or endings are never simple events. They are internal reconfigurations. Studies show that people who engage in abstract and reflective thinking have stronger connections between the emotional and analytical areas of the brain. In other words, they think while feeling and feel while thinking. They cannot separate logic from emotion. Both are intertwined like underground roots. That is why they cannot shut off their mind, or ignore what they feel, or simply stop thinking so much. Their brain does not work that way. Every thought has a pulse. Every emotion has structure. A deep thinker hears more than words. They hear what floats between them. Micro-expressions, minimal tensions in the voice, small inconsistencies in stories, energies that shift without warning. It is not magic. It is extreme attention. But this ability has a price. Once you see more, it is impossible to unsee. And then they discover uncomfortable patterns. People who say one thing and feel another. False happiness disguised as strength. Social masks so polished they hurt. When they perceive these contradictions, they retreat inward, not out of fear, but because authenticity is their oxygen. Imagine 10 radio stations playing at the same time inside your head. Memories, possibilities, doubts, ideas, intuitions. That is the mind of a deep thinker on a normal day. Even in silence, there is noise. And in that noise, rumination appears, circling a thought, searching for a resolution that sometimes does not exist. It is not negativity. It is a desperate search for meaning, for closure, for understanding. But not everything can be understood, and learning that is one of the hardest lessons for them. I think, therefore I am. For a deep thinker, that statement is true, but it can also be a prison. The prison is not made of visible bars. It is made of thoughts that multiply like mirrors facing each other. For them, every idea opens into another, every conclusion into a suspicion, every certainty into a what if. And that is where their most intimate conflict begins. They cannot help but search for the meaning behind the meaning. It is as if their mind has a second pulse, one that beats in questions, in possibilities, in nuances. While others can lean on quick intuitions, they feel the almost instinctive need to inspect the soul of the moment before surrendering to it. But that lucidity, so admirable from the outside, on the inside, can feel like an underground current impossible to stop. Because for the deep thinker, every emotion carries a story, every story a pattern, every pattern a lesson, and every lesson a risk. The risk of not allowing themselves to simply be. Many times they catch themselves trapped in an analysis they never asked for, as if the mind, instead of helping them live, races ahead of every experience to decompose it into theories. Is this authentic? Where does what I feel come from? Am I interpreting this correctly, or am I projecting? That habit, that almost biological impulse to unravel everything, can pull them away from direct experience, from the genuine trembling, from the pure instant. Not because they do not want to feel, but because they feel so much that they need to understand in order not to lose themselves inside their own mind. And yet in that constant search for clarity, in that dismantling of reality piece by piece, they forget an essential truth, that there are emotions whose magic depends on not being examined, like a melody that can only be enjoyed if you stop trying to transcribe it. It is that paradox that exhausts them the most. They know that thinking is their gift, but they also understand, even though it is hard to accept, that sometimes it is their greatest interference. And when they realize this, when they feel the weight of their own mind spinning like a carousel without brakes, a quiet internal whisper appears, almost always ignored. Stop. Not everything needs an explanation. But stopping is not simple for them. It is like asking the ocean to stand still. Sometimes they analyze love so much that they stop feeling it. They study fear so thoroughly that they anticipate it. They dissect emotion so completely that they strip it of spontaneity. Their great challenge is not to think better. It is to think less when the moment demands it. But when they achieve that balance, when they allow thought to be a compass and not a chain, they become extraordinary. Deep thinkers unite worlds, logic with empathy, reason with sensitivity, reflection with humanity. They do not see good people or bad people, they see stories. They read the silent scars of everyone, and that is why they can forgive easily, although they rarely forget. They keep lessons like stones that time polishes. Many deep thinkers seem melancholic, but it is not sadness. It is awareness. It is knowing that beauty and loss always travel together, that life constantly changes shape, that everything we love is temporary, and that is exactly why it matters. They have a unique emotional capacity, experiencing mixed emotions without breaking apart. They do not call sadness bad or joy good. Both are information. Both are teachers. There is something most people do not know. Deep thinkers are not always serious. In fact, many of them are surprisingly funny. Their humor is intelligent, unexpected, full of subtle connections. Depth does not eliminate lightness. It makes it richer. Because those who understand life from the inside know that without humor, the mind becomes a place too narrow to live in. Perhaps the greatest psychological journey of the deep thinker is not outward, but inward. Learning to stop the analysis, to accept uncertainty, to live with questions without turning them into puzzles, to understand that meaning is not found, it is created, that peace is not in knowing everything, it is in presence, in looking at the sky without trying to decode it, in existing without explaining yourself. They are not recognized by what they say, but by what they silence before saying it. That pause, that small space between thought and word, is not doubt. It is calibration. It is precision. They are people who know that words create worlds, and that is why they choose them with care. Depth should not become weight. It should not be an ocean where you drown, but a place where you learn to float. Being a deep thinker does not mean living in darkness. It means seeing layers that others cannot see. And when that vision combines with sensitivity, empathy, and presence, it becomes wisdom. Being a deep thinker is a gift and a burden, a path of light and shadow, a life of constant searching, but also of silent revelations. If you recognized yourself in these words, you are not broken. You are not strange. You are not too much. You simply have a mind that feels the world on a different scale, a mind that refuses to settle for the surface, a mind that when it learns to rest, becomes a lighthouse. Because depth, when lived well, does not drown, it illuminates. If this video put into words something you have always felt but could never explain, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We go deep here, and there is so much more to explore together. Leave a comment telling me which part of this video described you the most. Your story matters, and I will see you in the next one.